So, welcome everyone. I'm Jenny Nemko, the founder of TalkMatters, and TalkMatters promotes over 30 organizations, all involved with the Israel and the West Bank and Israelis and Palestinians talking together, listening together, meeting together, and hopefully building up some trust together. And with that very much in mind, I'm delighted to introduce you to Mori Sela, the founder of Israelis and Palestinians for Peace, and to Isam Bitar, an active member of Mori's initiative. TalkMatters only started up last summer, and Israelis and Palestinians for Peace, not very much long after, in March of this year. And I've been to a couple of Zoom meetings that Mori's put on, and I must tell you how fantastically I think he facilitated those meetings, particularly dealing with sometimes angry speakers who over very, very complex issues. So now let's find out more about the two of them, what they do and how they do it. And perhaps we can start with Isam telling me how you two met, how you met Mori, Isam.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jenny. Really excited to be here with you guys today. And so I met Mori, obviously through his peace initiative. I was invited to join the grassroots group that he formed on Facebook by a friend of mine. And I became an active member there. And I was then invited to listen in on some of the Zoom meetings that Mori chairs every week. And that was how I met Mori. And I attended a few of these Zoom meetings. After a few weeks, we got off to a nice and hopefully very productive, friendly relationship.
Were you looking for something like this for a long time, or how did you come to even go to the first meeting?
So I actually wasn't looking. So it is a really, I think it makes for an interesting story how I ended up in Mori's group. So I have historically, I mean, I'm only 28, but I have always been the kind of person who likes to engage with people from the so-called the side. I've got plenty of friends who are Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs alike, and it was actually in the aftermath of the latest escalation of violence in May. A friend of mine, a Jewish friend of mine, who actually lives in Mali Edomim, he. As the situation was unfolding, he was getting more vocal about the need for peace, etc. And I think that is how he came across Mori's grassroots movement. And then he thought I would make, a productive member, and he invited me to join. At the start, I was like, I don't want another one of these groups, because my past experience has been that they often descend into a blame game or an echo chamber, and I didn't want either of these things. But my friend promised that this one is different, and indeed it was. It was a completely different format. It was certainly really well managed, and the fact that there was this weekly Zoom meeting where you could meet people on a more personal level, see and hear each other, that was a fantastic thing that I think Mori has championed. And I'm really grateful for him for doing that, and that's how I came to become a member of his group.
Thank you. And Mori, what about you? Your bio mentions that you became a peace activist only a year ago. Why did it take you so long?
Yes, thank you. Thank you first for hosting this event and this meeting, and thank you, Isam, for what you said. It was news to me as well, so I enjoyed listening to it, and I learned from it. So yeah, I was, an average Israeli, I would say, taking care of my business, my career, my family, my sport hobbies, and it was pretty, capturing my entire time, right? But at the age of 55, I decided, and that was just almost a year ago, I decided that there should be something else in my life, and I would like to kind of devote myself to something good. And I thought, what area would be appropriate, both something that I relate to and something that I can be good at. And I always was passionate about this issue of Israelis and Palestinians, and how we are unable to solve this problem so many years. And it was very frustrating to me. And I thought, we had just had 4 elections in Israel in the last couple of years, in which the Israeli-Palestinian topic was not discussed. It was not an issue in 4 elections. And I thought that's not good. How could it be? And so I joined a couple of organizations. I joined Combatant for Peace, which is an organization that was actually established by Israeli who previously were combatants, soldiers, and on the other side, the Palestinians who previously were fighters against Israel. Many of them spent time in the jail, Israeli jail, and so forth. And so that organization basically said we must connect and we must meet, and it's a wonderful organization that meet in person. They meet sometimes, most of the time, they meet in the West Bank, and the Palestinian and Israeli together, they do some good project. And sometimes a person from the West Bank, it's a little more difficult for them, would come to Israel to sit in someone's house, and we would have meetings like that. And that was really fun, and not just fun, it was really productive, connecting, but quite complicated from a logistic point of view, and also not scalable. And I also joined another organization called Standing Together, which does similar things, but between Israeli Arabs and Jews. Okay, so people here in Israel, and that's a little more effective, more easy, but still we only had a face-to-face meeting once a month or so. So I said we must find another way to make it more scalable, more easy for people to meet. And I have a background with video conferencing and such. So even before COVID, I was using video conferencing very often. I was working for a video conferencing company. So I said that would be a great idea to just try to connect with people this way, virtually. And so I stumbled upon an application called Clubhouse, which is similar to Zoom, but without the video portion. So you see pictures of people, but you only use the audio section. I hosted a few meetings there. I created a club called Israelis and Palestinians, and I hosted a few meetings there. And it turned out to be quite successful. We had meetings with more than 100 people joining. Not all of them speaking, but joining the meeting as audience, many of them, and like 10 to 20 speaking. And we had them for hours, and that was really successful. And very interesting. First time that I was able to actually talk with the Palestinians, some of them from the West Bank, some of them from Gaza, some of them from the UK, some of them from, I had people from all over the world coming and joining, from Australia, etc., US, of course, and to hear different perspectives, to hear their stories, to be able to share with them my story. Sometimes they would have very, I would say, one-sided perspective on the situation and about the history and such. So I was able to share my side, and I thought it was very effective for me to learn and for them to learn and to actually see that there are, human, there is a human person on the other side and not just Israeli, Zionist,
And what's the proportion of Israelis and Palestinians who come along now to your meetings?
Okay, so I made it a little long answer, I'm sorry. But then after opening the Clubhouse thing, I actually opened a Facebook group. And on Clubhouse, we reached about 1,600 people in terms of membership. And then I opened the Facebook group, and then it grew pretty fast, especially it grew during the May events. And now we are over 3,000, 3.2K members. And out of them, I don't have the exact numbers. I know that, only about 100 of them are actually from Palestine, from the West Bank, and a few from Gaza, just a very few from Gaza. We have about 800 from Israel, and another 2,000 or so that are from around the world. And I can't say exactly what percentage is Palestinian, what percentage is Jews/Israeli. So,
but yeah, it's really important that you up the Palestinians. Surely, if you want to talk to Israelis and Palestinians for peace, we need more Palestinians to be involved.
Right. So again, initially it was only Israelis. Slowly but slowly, we got some Palestinians joining in. For Palestinians in the West Bank, and especially in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, there is a bit of a risk in joining a group like that and in joining those videos. In the Gaza, one of the people who actually is a member of us, and I won't share the name, but for his privacy, but one of the members actually was in jail in the Hamas jail for 6 months with torture because he was participating in a Zoom meeting with Israelis. So there is a risk there. And now he's back. He's a very courageous person.
Very courageous.
And in the West Bank, it's forbidden to collaborate with in what they call normalized relationship with Israeli settlers, Jewish settlers. But with us, it's legal. But still, even though it's legal, there is some criticism by some of the people in the West Bank who view it as collaborating with the enemy, normalizing relationship with the enemy, etc., etc. So it is risky for some of the Palestinians. Therefore, that's one of the reasons that we don't have as many. I would say another main reason would be that we have the meetings in English, and many Palestinians, they don't speak English. So it's a problem for them. And we do have a few that we kind of try to translate, etc., but it's a little more difficult for them to join. Yes. And participate in such. So these are the excuses that I have, but indeed I'm trying all my best to bring as many Palestinians as possible, and we do see more and more of them coming in as time goes by.
Yes, thank you. And what do you think is the things that you can do to create peace that no other organization is doing or is trying to do? What is it special about your organization?
So for me, if I'm able to make one person make him more peaceful and to understand the other side and search for peace, I think I've achieved something. But it's not enough, of course. I really am interested in making an impact on a large scale. And again, we are just a few months old and we have 3K. I hope that we will reach thousands, many thousands, and perhaps even, something in the range of 30,000, 40,000 people. I think that will start to make more impact. So basically, I think, the more people on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side participate in those kind of discussions, and again, considering the peaceful approach versus the status quo, which is basically hating each other, that's going to make an impact, I think. And eventually, we are all a part of a larger group of peacemakers that we collaborate with on different peace initiatives. For example, this month, on the 24th of this month, we are going to have a joint event for my organization. I actually, myself and another Palestinian initiated this event. But in this event, we will have 13 other peace organizations taking active role, including Women Wage Peace, Peace Now, Combatant from Peace, Standing Together, and the Israeli Forum of Peace Organizations, which is actually one organization that combines of many others. And so all of those together, more than 13 organizations coming together, and we are having a peace event on the 24th that I hope will generate some, publicity, and many people will come. And that's just first. So we are going to actually have this every month in different city within Israel, and hopefully also we'll have something like that on the Palestinian West Bank side.
And will it be Zoomed as well? Will you be meeting people and Zooming? Will you do those two things?
Absolutely. My unique side in my organization is really the virtual portion. Yes. So we are virtually based, and therefore the event will be shared by Zoom, and also it will be streamed by Facebook.
Lovely.
So people will be invited from everywhere to actually join and watch. If they want to join by video, by Zoom, they would actually be able to be seen and talk. But if they just want to watch what's happening in the event, they can use the Facebook live stream.
Brilliant. And can I ask, Isam, you no longer live in Palestine, and does that give you a different perspective on the region?
So it's difficult to answer that question, because now a lot of people might think that because I no longer live there, then I have, let's say, a smaller stake. But that's not necessarily true, because I do have immediate family who still live there. So it is very much still a personal issue for me. Now, I do, as someone who doesn't live there, I do have more liberty to speak, to challenge, to do many things, to write, to make interviews, all that kind of stuff. Now, because Mori does have a point when it comes to the fact that it is not very easy for a Palestinian to do these things. The thing is, when you're in Palestine, you don't really know where you stand when it comes to what's okay and what's not, because there's nothing that is quite, cut and dry or clear, that if you do this, then you're on the bad side of the authorities. If you don't, then you're okay. There's a lot of discretion that goes on in that, and sometimes you can't really afford that. So that has certainly helped me. The fact that I have that liberty now to do all of that. Although I have never really felt like I was constrained by this. I think I was always a bit mad and I didn't care. I did get, you know, plenty of I got death threats, I got general threats, all kinds of threats. I got people who agreed, who disagreed, all kinds of stuff, even while I was still in Palestine. To answer your question, maybe more directly, I don't think much has changed in the way that I view the conflict, or I view either side. You know, between me being there in person, or me being here in the UK, more or less remotely. I still maintain a strong connection to Palestine. I visit often. I have immediate family who lives there. I don't think anything has changed in the way that I view the Palestine and Israel.
Thank you. And you've developed or co-developed a peace proposal. Can you just briefly tell us about that?
Yeah. So it was actually something of a spontaneous kind of. That's why we called it Caesar Day. So for the viewers, we called our peace initiative Caesar Day because it was really a spontaneous thing that just kind of materialized and formed as we were having a discussion. It kind of started with somebody asking me, what would you consider as justice? And that's how we started a whole conversation that ended up with us developing a group of core tenets, shall we call them, of what we believe would be an equitable solution. And it is based on the two-state solution. So there are two states. But we value a more democratic approach to it. So, for example, our solution to Jerusalem is not a top-down, you get this much, we get this much, or we get everything, you get nothing kind of thing, but rather it is more of a, you divide Jerusalem into constituencies who vote for where they would want to be, and it's kind of like a referendum. And that is how Jerusalem would be divided. And then the empty or the sparsely populated parts of Jerusalem would then be divided in a way that would ensure contiguity for both states. So that's how we approached that issue. We also approached the issue of the right of return for Palestinian refugees from a more practical, but also a more sustainable perspective. So we had it so that there is a fund that would allow those who are indigent to apply for that fund to be settled either in Palestine or elsewhere in the world, etc., which is equitably funded by both Israel and Palestine. And by that we mean Israel would probably fund most of it, given that its economy is 30 times as large as Palestinian economy. So that puts it so that there is a feeling of equity in there, you know, for the Palestinians who believe that Israel should atone for the sins of displacement of Palestinians. That provides that Israel is funding the resettlement of Palestinians.
Yes.
And for Israelis who believe, you know, it was war and Palestinians refugees don't have any claim to come back to Israel, then they have the assurance that this resettlement isn't necessarily in Israel, or most likely not in Israel. So that kind of thing as well. We also advocated for an EU-style partnership where the ultimate goal is for there to be frictionless movement, because we believe that this would allow those who feel that, you know, Palestinians who feel that they're home or they belong somewhere like Jaffa or Haifa, they would have that freedom of movement to go there, to work there, and eventually to settle there through controlled immigration. And the same for Israelis who see the mountains of and the hills of Samaria and the mountains of Judea as their homeland, they would have frictionless access to that as well. Plus, obviously, all of the benefits that frictionless movement brings, which we already see in places like Europe. And it is a focus on that. It is a focus on mutually beneficial and also mutually binding agreements and benefits that we think would create a just and lasting peace, rather than the traditional two-state solutions that have been offered to date, which basically produce vassalage. So a Palestinian vassal state that is basically, it's not really independent. It's just changing the title of the Palestinian Authority to become the government of the state of Palestine. But in reality, everything remains the same. You know, you have no control of your borders. You have no right to strike your own deals, whether trade or military alliances, etc. You're confined to your little place. You have, you know, no access to what you might believe is the rest of Palestine, etc. You put an impermeable segregation between the two nations, which is also a sore, you know, it's a sore spot for Israelis who believe that they should be entitled to parts of the West Bank. So these issues that traditionally have made the two-state solution unacceptable for Israelis and Palestinians, we believe that our vision tries to get over these issues. Another issue that I didn't discuss is the issue of settlements. In our view, what happens is that Israeli settlements would become villages, so Palestinian villages. Those Israelis or the Israeli Jews who live in those now Palestinian villages under Palestinian sovereignty would be entitled to Palestinian citizenship or Palestinian permanent residence, and their properties. So to answer to the people who might say, oh, but then the Palestinian authorities will expropriate that. In our agreement, there would be perpetual protection, kind of like how embassies work. You know, they're protected in perpetuity from expropriation, but at the same time, those settlements are open to Palestinians to live there as well as the settlements grow and develop. Well, they become villages and towns, and that would answer the logistical and security issue of displacing 700,000 settlers. At the same time, it would also allow Palestinians access to that land, and they'll be entitled to it, and it would. We feel that would be a reasonable kind of solution that would benefit both parties. So that is the essence of our proposal.
Thank you. So, Mori, this proposal was put to one of your group meetings. How did your supporters take to it? Well, I wasn't there, but what happened? What was the discussion that followed Isam's proposal for peace? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, so indeed, we had this presentation by Isam and his colleagues and his friends. It was very, very interesting. I must say that we as a group, we do not endorse one solution versus the other. There are quite a few solutions that I would say, we disapprove because we just think they are not fair. Typically, it would be a solution that is not fair for the Palestinians. There are some crazy ideas in our group sometimes, which we basically block out of the group because we feel that they are alienating and disruptive to peace. But other than that, there are quite a few solutions that are all, I would say, would be a lot better than the current situation, and they are all valid, in my opinion. Isam's solution is one of them, and you have a couple of confederation approaches that were presented in our group, and quite a few federation proposals that were presented. And there is the Geneva Accord proposal, which I believe is still relevant. I actually find it the most relevant personally. But again, there are a range of valid solutions, and actually even one state solution is valid in my opinion. I don't think it will happen because of the dynamics of the Israeli population, and the Jewish population, but I think it's valid. So my point is this: we want to have peace. We would like to make, some kind of impact that will bring politicians into the table to actually agree on something. And we want to show people that there are a lot of options. It's not something that cannot be achieved. There are many solutions that could be great. Any of them could be much better than the current situation. So that's our approach.
Yeah, but there is an argument that suggests that there needs to be a healthy shared society in Israel within the Green Line before you can work to creating peace with Palestinians in the West Bank. The Israelis themselves are so divided, and then Israelis and Palestinians in Israel. There seems to be so many issues. There's not a real shared society there.
Yes, but I would say that a major reason for that division within Israel is because the Palestinians living in Israel, some call them Israeli Arabs, but they call themselves for the most part Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. But they are very connected emotionally, and sometimes they have relationship, family relationship with Palestinians on the other side. And so until we solve the Palestinian issue, there will always be an issue also with the Israeli Palestinians. And once we do solve the Palestinian issue, the conflict with Palestine, then I think the relationship with the Israeli Palestinians would become much better, and over time it will be very much similar to what happened between Jewish Mizrahis and Jewish Ashkenazis, which in the beginning there was a huge gap and a huge divide, and today it's becoming less and less of an issue. And I think the same would happen with the Israeli Palestinians. Once we have peace with Palestine, then this divide will not remain a major issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So moving things on, it's building relationships, trusting people, and at the same time changing policy. How strong, what influence do you have on the policymakers?
Well, I call, if you go to our website, you will see, let's create a grassroots movement. So it's not just this group right now with 3,000 people. That's not enough. We need to create a grassroots movement that impacts thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people. And that's the objective. I mean, we need to make enough noise, I would call it, in a positive way, so that other Israelis will notice, so that the media will notice, so that politicians will notice. And I think, by the way, that there is a major role for the international community here as well, because a lot of those conflicts, if you look at the South African conflict in the apartheid days, it wouldn't be solved if there wasn't an international pressure and international impact there. And so I think Israel is much dependent on the US and in Europe, and pressure coming from those countries, those places is also important. And we as a global organization, as I said, 2/3 of our organization is actually outside of Israel, Israel-Palestine. I think, our goal is to make an impact also internationally.
Okay.
That said, again, it's a long process. It's not going to happen next week and not next month and probably not next year. My goal is within 10 years. By 2030, less than 10 years, in 9 years, I want a peace to be there. That's my goal.
It's a wonderful goal, but as well as externally, we have to change ourselves also internally, don't we? Tools, what tools can you give us in your sessions? Do you talk about empathy, talking to people other than yourself, all the things that are going to change things at a grassroots level? Are those tools that you could try to hand on to some of your supporters?
So that's a great question, and honestly, something that we need to do more. Some of the members in the group mentioned that we need to kind of invite experts in the area of nonviolent communication and other reconciliation, conflict resolution type of approaches. We haven't done that so far. So far, we had two types of discussions in the group. One is where people share their vision for peace and their frustrations and their challenges. That's one type of meetings that we had. Another one was when we spoke about activism, and we are actually having another activism type of session, and just this week. And the third one will be about different types of solutions. Okay, and I mentioned the different solutions that are out there. So these are kind of the type of discussion that we had, but indeed, we will introduce also other ideas such as teaching nonviolent communications and things like that.
Great, that's great. And that, you know, I'm involved with Wahat al-Salam, Nevi Shalom, and the School for Peace is doing a tremendous amount of work with would-be politicians, town planners, all sorts of people, Palestinians and Israelis, to further their work together and to give them the tools to talk to each other as well. Okay, I'd like to end by asking you both, first of all, Isam, Isam, about the Abrahamic Accords. Do you think that could create new opportunities for peace in the region?
I have actually written an article about that in Arabic for the Arabic-speaking media group Dahlak, for whom I write. So I do believe that this is for the most part, a positive change. Now, I have always held the belief that if you want to influence Israeli policy, you have to have something that matters to Israelis. Now, I use the example of Jordan and Lebanon, right? You know, whose opinion does Israel value more, Jordan's or Lebanon's? And the answer is absolutely Jordan's, because Jordan has relationships with Israel. They have trade relationships, they have security partnerships, they have alliances, and they communicate, they benefit from each other. Israel has something, Israel, you know, it has vested interest in Jordan. On the other hand, Lebanon does not. It boycotts Israel, doesn't recognize Israel. There's nothing that Lebanon could do or say that would get any Israeli ears listening. And that is why I thought, and I still believe, that the Abraham Accords were pivotal, because now there are more voices that Israel is willing to listen to. And but this could go either way, you see. Mm-hmm. For us, the Palestinians, if we now make enemies with the Arab states that have signed these accords, then we shoot ourselves in the foot. Instead, if we keep positive relationships with these states, then we would have some form of diplomatic pressure on Israel to perhaps maybe one day do right by us. And I use as an example for that being a potential case. There was, in 2019, there was strong talk of Israel annexing large parts of the West Bank. Now, if I recall correctly, the UAE put a condition for signing the accords that Israel abandons that idea, and they did. Now, cynics will say that, oh, that was just a temporary thing. Israel will come back to that later and do what it wants to anyway. But you know what? Even buying time is better than, well, basically not. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So let's end with, first of all, you, Isam, saying what message can you give us, people who, like yourself now, don't live in Israel, but people like me, not Israeli, not Palestinian. How can people abroad help in peace activities? And I'm going to ask the same question to end off with Mori, but first of all, you, Isam.
I believe people outside of Israel and Palestine can do a lot by engaging with their own politicians, with the local politicians. You know, if you can raise awareness, and if you can get talking with politicians, and if you can create a drive, if you can create some force in world countries, especially in Europe or in the United States, countries that Israel traditionally respects, yeah. If you can create an overall peace promoting culture, then there is hope that with internal pressures and external pressures, there would be move towards peace and justice in Palestine. So that, I think, should be our mission, as you know, whether Jewish or Palestinian in diaspora, or non-Jews and non-Palestinians alike, is to create that pressure, is to create that movement.
Thank you.
In the world.
What would you say to that question?
So first, I totally agree with Isam. I would say, in addition, that the Israeli public has been now under Netanyahu's regime for the last 12, 13 years. I would say in a kind of brainwashing type of mode, that there is no partner on the other side, that we cannot achieve peace because we cannot trust the Palestinians. And it actually soaked, okay? So many Israelis who used to be on the left has moved to the center and some to the right, because indeed they believe that there is no partner that we can trust on the other side, and that they are not interested in peace. They just want to get everything. They want to get the entire country, etc., etc. And I'm sure on the Palestinian side, many of them think that all Israelis are awful people. They are all just like the settlers and like the soldiers that they see on the checkpoints. And so that's the main issue we need to deal with. We need to do a counter brainwash, and that's really to wash out the dirt from the brain, and to explain to people, to Israelis, that there are many Palestinians interested in peace, and I would say the majority for sure, interested in peace. They want to have a decent life. They want to have liberty. They don't want to have settlers stealing their land day by day. They don't want to see checkpoints and a young soldier humiliate my father and my mother right there. They want to have water. They want to be able to fly and educate themselves around the world. So they want whatever Israeli has, they want as well, which and they should. And of course, again, there is an issue with corruption in their government, and there are issues with leadership and Hamas being an extremist organization and such. But there are still enough good people, peaceful people out there that we need to take care of, and we need to care of. And so that's the Israeli side, and the same I think can happen on the Palestinian side, where through these type of discussions and forums, more and more Palestinians would see that there is a good side also on the Israeli side, and there's somebody who is interested in peace, and perhaps we can reach peace. And so again, it's something that we need to jointly create as a grassroots movement with many people, eventually influencing politicians, but first influencing the people.
Okay, and that's where Isam's point comes in, that you can influence people abroad, particularly because you're using webinars and we can zoom in from anywhere. And so you can encourage a much wider circulation of people to hear what you've got to say.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. We have more inspirational speakers joining us for our regular webinars. Visit talkmatters.info to join our mailing list and come along to our next live webinar.